Part 1. The Storm. In Chapter 1, Persephone seeks counsel from the ancient tree Magda, asking if more needs to be done to protect her people from the Fhrey. As the tree begins to act erratically, Suri reveals that Magda is warning them to run from something approaching. Suddenly, the tree is struck by lightning and splits in two. Persephone, Arion, Suri, and Minna flee into the forest as storms and fire rage around them. They take shelter in a carved stone room just in time to escape the chaos. As the storm continues outside, they realize they're not alone. In Chapter 2, Gifford, a crippled potter, is testing a brace made by Roan, a young woman with a keen mind but an aversion to touch. Roan's contraption momentarily helps Gifford stand, but the brace fails, and he falls. Yet he remains optimistic about her invention. Suddenly, a fierce storm hits the village, bringing relentless lightning, hail, and devastating winds. Villagers, including Gifford and Roan, take shelter in the storage pit as their homes are destroyed. After the storm, they emerge to find the village in ruins. A mysterious banging on the gate signals more trouble ahead. In Chapter 3, Persephone, Arion, and Suri seek shelter in a roll, a stone room with a glowing green gemstone at its center, where they encounter 3 Dherg, Frost, Flood, and Rain. The Dherg are initially hostile, but after some tense exchanges, Persephone introduces herself and her companions. The group discovers that Suri, a mystic, can find these hidden shelters. As the storm outside intensifies, Persephone realizes that the lightning targeting them was no accident. Arion, exhausted from the storm's effects, lies down, while the Dherg express their distrust of Fhrey, calling them nightmares. Suddenly, a tremor shakes the roll and a massive eye peers in. Part 2. Giant Problems. In Chapter 1, Persephone and her group seek escape from a roll as a massive giant punches through the ceiling, causing them to flee. The giant nearly captures Arion, but Rain intervenes, injuring the giant and allowing them to escape. Outside, they see the destruction left by the storm, but Arion confronts the giant, who becomes trapped in the earth as she manipulates the ground to pull him under. Pleading for his life, the giant admits he was sent to kill them, hinting at a larger threat. Arion demands to know who else was involved, hinting at hidden enemies. In Chapter 2, Gifford watches as 12 angry giants enter Dal Ren, breaking down the gate and destroying the storm-damaged village. The Fhrey warriors, including Eris, Sebek, and Anwer, confront the giants, launching javelins and slingshots and engaging them in intense combat. Roan, captivated by the scene, observes the Frey's fighting techniques, while Grigor, a giant himself, aids the Fhrey by killing one of his kin. After a fierce battle, the giants retreat, carrying their fallen. Gifford realizes the full devastation to the village, with survivors emerging from hiding and the dead scattered among the ruins. Part 3. The Circle of Fire. In Chapter 1, Arion suffers from intense headaches following her injury, leaving her unable to fully use her magical powers known as the Art. As Suri and Padera try remedies to help her recover, Nifron confronts her, pushing for war against the Fane in response to the attack on Dal Ren. He explains the growing threat posed by the rapidly expanding rune population, which outnumbers the Fhrey significantly. Despite Arion's skepticism about Nifron's plans to train the runes to fight the Fhrey, Nifron insists on his strategy, certain that conflict is unavoidable and that they must be prepared. In Chapter 2, Dal Ren reels from a devastating attack that has left its homes and defenses in ruins. Wraith reflects on the destruction, the high death toll, and the struggles of survivors. As Persephone addresses the villagers, she reveals that the Fhrey leader has long aimed to eliminate them, seeing their potential as a threat. Persephone proposes uniting the clans under a single leader to fight back. Nifron pledges to train them in combat, promising the Frey's superior skills and Dherg rune protection. With renewed hope, Persephone announces plans for the village to journey south, marking the beginning of their resistance. Part 4. Rapnagar. In Chapter 1, Suri and her companions navigate through a forest devastated by a mysterious storm, encountering the fallen ancient tree Magda. Their group includes the silent warrior Nifron, the graceful Arion, and a trapped giant, Rapnagar. Nifron interrogates Rapnagar, learning of a plot by a Fhrey leader, Petrigar, targeting Nifron and others, with promises of rune territory. Arion and Nifron clash over Rapnagar's fate, as Nifron wants to kill him despite promising freedom in exchange for information. Arion stands firm, insisting on honoring the deal, revealing her idealism in contrast to Nifron's pragmatism. In Chapter 2, Aryan begins teaching Suri the art, aiming to free Rapnagar, a giant Suri mistrusts due to his violent past. Suri, hesitant but eager to learn, struggles to grasp Aryan's complex teachings on magic and vibrations, seeing them as akin to weaving strings. While attempting to control the earth around Rapnagar, Suri becomes overwhelmed, ultimately misunderstanding Aryan's instructions. Instead of freeing the giant, she accidentally tightens the ground, crushing Rapnagar's head. Horrified, Aryan halts Suri's efforts, but Nifron observes approvingly, seemingly unfazed by the giant's fate, as Suri realizes the grave consequences of her inexperience. Part 5. Small Solutions. In Chapter 1, Persephone struggles to evacuate Dalren as villagers lack the skills of their nomadic ancestors. While grief grips the community, she manages their efforts, assigning tasks and confronting challenges like carrying vital supplies. Moya humorously criticizes the physical demands, while Persephone worries about essentials like food and water for the uncertain journey. Roan, inspired, devises a makeshift cart with wheels, unknowingly reinventing the wheel itself. The discovery draws the attention of the dwarfs, who agree to help Roan improve the design, potentially aiding the village's relocation. Persephone seizes this innovation, offering a pact with the dwarfs to ensure their cooperation. In Chapter 2, the Dherg assist Persephone by creating carts, barrels, and wheels to store food and water for the journey, making travel preparations much easier. Persephone, grateful for their help, introduces the Dherg to Aryan for a request. The Dherg explain that they had fled their homeland after an illegal expedition where they encountered a giant creature barring their people from returning. They ask for Aryan's help to defeat it. Aryan, focused on stopping the impending war, declines but invites them to join the journey south. The Dherg depart, plotting to persuade her further. Part 6. The Prince. In Chapter 1, Mawandul, the new junior counselor, reflects on his disdain for most people, especially Vidar, his senior counselor. Vidar lectures him on the history and function of the Aquila, the Fhrey Council, explaining its role in selecting the challenger for the Horn of Gilendora. Mawandul grows increasingly bored with Vidar's rambling, but becomes intrigued when he learns about the importance of the Council's role in choosing who can challenge for the Horn. As Vidar continues his lecture, Mawandul contemplates the potential challengers for the Horn and questions his own enemies among the Fhrey. In Chapter 2, Mawandul, now 25, visits the Erenthenon for the first time. He is unimpressed by the simple council chamber, finding it smaller and less grand than expected. During the meeting, he is introduced as the newest member of the council, which brings him a moment of pride despite his discomfort. Emily Fane, a direct descendant of Gilendora, presides over the gathering. The discussion turns to recent failed attacks and the defeat of the Grinmorians, leading to tension between Emily and Vidar. Mawandul is distracted by a girl in the third tier who gazes at him with interest. In Chapter 3, Mawandul's excitement for his first day as a council member fades into disillusionment after a tedious meeting. He had hoped for grand debates, but was left with only a single word of agreement. As he exits, he encounters Emily, who advises him to stand up for himself and warns that Vidar won't forget his potential. Mawandul reflects on his position as the prince and future ruler, feeling like an outsider. He then meets Macaretta, a Miralith artist, and the two bond over a painting. She invites him to a secret gathering, piquing his curiosity. Part 7. The Road to Tira. In Chapter 1, Roan checks the carts for damage as they continue their journey. Though exhausted and stressed, she ensures they're holding up. She's fascinated by the dwarfs and their knowledge, especially Rain, who introduced her to new tools like saws and bushings. As the caravan moves south, Roan reflects on her past with Ivor, now gone, and the difficulty of letting go. Meanwhile, Moya participates in a light-hearted training session with the Galantians, impressing everyone despite her awkwardness. Roan is introspective, recognizing her own sense of inadequacy while trying to understand Gifford's emotional reaction to their shared past. In Chapter 2, Suri lies in a field, avoiding Aryan, but the Fhrey finds her. They discuss their recent actions, with Suri admitting she didn't want to kill the giant. Aryan explains the unpredictable nature of the art, which can act like a force of its own. Suri reveals her past, how she longed for independence after Tura's death, but now, regrets the loss of her simpler life. Arian admits her struggle with magic and the pain it causes her. As they share a moment of vulnerability, Suri comforts Arian, realizing that both of them are deeply affected by the choices they've made. In Chapter 3, Roan finds Bryn, who has been deeply affected by the giant's attack and her parents' death. Bryn is struggling with grief, but begins to show Roan her idea for preserving stories through markings on cloth, similar to how Suri painted symbols. Bryn believes she can document the stories of her life and her parents in a way that ensures they're never forgotten. Roan is amazed by the concept, and Malcolm recognizes that Bryn's idea could change the world. The chapter ends with Bryn leaving, carrying her cloth markings, filled with a sense of purpose. Part 8. Ride of the Stone God. In Chapter 1, Persephone and her group, 5 days from Ren, approach Dal Tira, where tension builds. After sending messengers about the giant's attack, Persephone hopes for a welcome but fears the decision of Tira's leaders. As they approach the gate, 3 horns sound, signaling a threat. Despite this, the gates remain open and people rush inside. A cart, driven by Malcolm and Cobb, begins rolling uncontrollably downhill, killing Cobb and causing panic. The cart crashes into the gate, wreaking havoc and throwing Marie, a god, and other items inside the doll, creating chaos and silence afterward. In Chapter 2, Persephone enters Dal Tira after the chaos caused by the runaway cart. She searches for any casualties, but finds only destruction. The people gather around the god Marie unharmed, and Persephone faces Chieftain Lippet. Lippet apologizes, explaining they were misinformed about Clan Ren's intentions, and admits they were wrong to consider them enemies. After some tense exchanges, Persephone secures sanctuary for her people, with Lippet offering a warm welcome. He also agrees to let Clan Ren camp outside, and Persephone delegates tasks to Wraith and Malcolm before entering the doll for rest. In Chapter 3, Persephone's group mourns the victims of the cart accident, including Cobb and 2 others. Wraith informs the survivors that Clan Tire has agreed to welcome them and they can camp outside the north wall. Malcolm speaks about the sacrifices made and the unity they've gained from the tragedy. Wraith discusses with Roan how to prevent future accidents with the carts, while Gifford defends Roan, emphasizing that the cart wasn't the cause of death. Roan agrees to fix the carts. Wraith notices a young boy grieving the loss of his parents but doesn't pursue further. Part 9. Under the Rose Bridge. In Chapter 1, Mawandul reflects on his frustration over his father's failure to act decisively in the attack on Avampartha, blaming Jared for the failure. While attending a council meeting, Mawandul witnesses the incompetence of the new First Minister, Cabane, and others, as they discuss the rune's growing unity and potential war plans. When Lothian dismisses the threat, Mawandul can't hold back and demands stronger action, advocating for the slaughter of their enemies. His father orders him out of the meeting, and Mawandul storms off, angrily overturning his desk before leaving. In Chapter 2, Mawandul seeks an escape from his father and the Talwara, wandering through the garden while reflecting on his frustrations. He contemplates the artificial perfection of the garden, thinking about the chaos he believes life should embody. As he approaches the door, a mysterious and ominous structure, he recalls unsettling memories and the fear it inspires. He spots a stranger sitting near the door, but moves on without engaging. Mawandul decides to visit the Rose Bridge, partly out of curiosity about a meeting and partly to escape his father's search, imagining a quiet encounter with Makareta. In Chapter 3, Mawandul arrives at the Rose Bridge to find a gathering of Moralith people, including Makareta. They drink wine, share stories, and engage in playful activities. He is introduced to Aiden, a member of the group, who talks about the Miralith's superior status and their belief in a new era. The conversation shifts to past events, including the death of Grindel, which deeply affects the group. Mawandul enjoys the company and feels an unexpected connection, especially with Makareta. He decides to join the group, drawn by their welcoming nature and his growing attraction to her. Part 10. Something to Believe in. In Chapter 1, Wraith reflects on the harsh conditions in Clan Ren's camp near Dal Tira, where rain has caused frustration and discontent. Despite the setbacks, Roan devises a solution using wool and spears to create shelter, improving morale. During a break at the cooking pit, Wraith interacts with Flood, a Dherg, who questions his bronze sword, calling it lightweight and inferior. Wraith defends it, revealing it was made by elves. Flood examines Wraith's family heirloom sword, identifying it as pure copper, a rare and valuable metal. This insight shifts Wraith's perspective on his father's prized possession. In Chapter 2, Wraith follows Persephone on a walk as she seeks relief from the confinement of the camp. They discuss the vastness of the ocean, the power of the sea god Eriphus, and the origins of their people. Persephone reveals that all the Rulan chieftains are gathered, and Wraith is now the Durian chieftain, meaning he has a vote in choosing the Koenig, but can no longer serve as Persephone's shield. Wraith proposes leaving to start anew in Averland, but Persephone rejects the idea, insisting she must stay and lead, believing in hope and the possibility of triumph through unity. In Chapter 3, Wraith decides to leave after realizing Persephone won't join him. He's bitter about his past, feeling abandoned by his family and clan, and sees no future with her. As he packs, he encounters a boy named Tesh, who reveals he is also Durian. The boy challenges Wraith's decision to leave and accuses him of abandoning his people, pushing Wraith to reflect on his own clan's laws and responsibilities. Wraith begrudgingly agrees to train Tesh and take him as his shield, offering food in exchange. The boy, determined to kill the Fhrey, accepts, and they set off together. Part 11. Under the Wool. In Chapter 1, the rain stops, and the people of Ren return to their routines. Roan, working on a wooden bow, discusses her plans with Gifford, who is still recovering from his injuries. Gifford suggests that Roan could trade her pottery in a nearby market for goods, and they plan to explore for materials. Roan reveals she has borrowed a javelin from the Galantians, which worries Gifford. Despite his physical limitations and struggles with communication, he plans to return the javelin and looks after Roan's safety. The chapter highlights Gifford's inner turmoil and his protective feelings for Roan. In Chapter 2, Roan helps Bryn decipher a series of drawings on a stone, which turn out to depict the rain stopping and the sun emerging. Bryn is overjoyed by Roan's understanding, but Roan has a physical and emotional reaction to the touch, leading to a panic attack. After calming down, Roan apologizes and walks away, disturbed by Bryn's fearful reaction. Roan then notices a commotion at the Galantian camp, where she finds Gifford badly beaten by the Fhrey. His tearful look leaves Roan stunned, triggering memories of past emotional trauma from her deceased father Ivor. In Chapter 3, Moya converses with the elderly Pedera while reflecting on recent events. Moya has been learning swordsmanship from Tection and has grown close to him, though she is also distressed by Gifford's actions. Gifford took a javelin belonging to the Fhrey, which led to a brutal beating by Eris. Moya, despite her connection to Gifford, did nothing to stop it, leaving her guilt-ridden. As she talks with Pedera, Moya realizes that Roan, not Gifford, took the javelin, and the thought adds to her self-loathing. Pedera offers some comfort, but Moya feels consumed by regret. Part 12. The Council of Time. In Chapter 1, the Rulan chieftains gather in an open courtyard to discuss the looming war with the Fhrey. Tensions rise as they debate leadership, with Tegan and others rejecting Lipit's bid for Koenig. Persephone takes charge, presenting the dire situation. The Fhrey have declared war, not because of one death, but due to the threat the runes pose to their existence. Nifron, a former Fhrey leader, confirms the Frey's intent to destroy the runes and offers his assistance, urging the chieftains to unite under a strong, strategic leader. He emphasizes the need for wisdom and unity to survive the coming war. In Chapter 2, the chieftains reconvene the morning after Nifron's speech. Tegan, Harkon, and Krugen emphasize the need for unity and the importance of selecting a Koenig. The chieftains agree to compile a list of candidates. Persephone reflects on Wraith's youth and inexperience, feeling a distance between them. Despite her respect for him, she remains emotionally tied to her late husband, Reglan, whose memory still influences her decisions. She resolves to maintain her distance from Wraith, recognizing the complications their relationship could bring, and decides to address matters in the next council meeting. In Chapter 3, the chieftains meet again to nominate a Koenig. Tegan, Harkon, Krugen, and others all make grand speeches, touting their lineages and personal achievements. Persephone nominates Wraith, citing his victory over Fhrey and his ability to inspire hope. However, Wraith refuses the title, believing the war is unwinnable. He expresses doubt about their chances, highlighting the inadequacy of their weapons against the Frey's superior armor and weapons. Wraith dismisses the notion of false hope, leaving the chieftains shocked as he exits the meeting, leaving behind a sword to emphasize his point. In Chapter 4, Persephone searches for Wraith but fails to find him. The next day, the chieftains meet again, but Wraith is absent, training a young boy in Tyr. Allward suggests fleeing across the sea, but Bryn, Ren's keeper, explains there's nowhere to return to. The discussion turns to gods, with Krugen suggesting prayer for help. Lipit proposes praying to Mari, Ren's goddess, who has shown favor to the clan. Tegan suggests offering sacrifices, hoping Mari will send swords for the warriors. They all notice the statue of Mari facing Wraith's sword, hinting that only he can retrieve it. In Chapter 5, Persephone and Bryn discuss the possibility of securing Mari's help before encountering the Dherg, Frost, and Flood, who asked Persephone to persuade Arion to help them with a giant problem. Persephone, noticing the Dherg's high-quality armor, seizes the opportunity to negotiate for weapons. She proposes that, in exchange for Arion's aid with the giant, the Dherg provides swords for her people to defend against the Fhrey. Frost agrees to arrange a meeting with a Dherg weaponsmith, hinting at an alliance that could strengthen Persephone's position and give her people a fighting chance. Part 13. Crossing the Bridge. In Chapter 1, Suri and Arion discuss the art, with Arion explaining how Suri's string game pales in comparison to manipulating nature's true chords. Persephone interrupts, seeking Arion's assistance as the runes struggle with leadership, resources, and war preparations. Arion proposes an alternative to warfare, hoping Suri can demonstrate rune worth to the Fhrey. Persephone insists on securing weapons for defense and agrees to let Suri go to Neath with Arion to deal with a giant in exchange for weapons. They form a plan. Arion will teach Suri the art, while Persephone joins to negotiate for her people's survival. In Chapter 2, heavy rains disrupt the camp, dividing it into East and West Puddle. Habit builds private quarters for Persephone, but she stays in East Puddle with Bryn, Moya, Padera, and Roan. Persephone prepares to leave for Belgrig with Arion and Suri to secure weapons by dealing with a giant for the Dherg. Moya questions her decision, especially since Persephone doesn't plan to take Wraith, her former shield, because she wants him to stay and become Koenig. Persephone hopes her return with weapons will convince Wraith and the other chieftains to unite under his leadership. In Chapter 3, Persephone reluctantly agrees to let Bryn join her journey to Belgrig, convinced by Malcolm's argument that Bryn should document this historic trip. Moya, concerned for Persephone's safety, insists on coming along as her protector, despite Persephone's reassurances about Arion's strength. Moya further demands Roan accompany them, worried for her safety after learning Gifford was beaten while defending Roan's actions. Persephone tries to dissuade them, but ultimately Moya and Roan prepare to join. Persephone learns that Gifford is recovering, but the incident raises unease about the group's vulnerability and the challenges they may face. In Chapter 4, Persephone and her group navigate through Vernaise, boarding a Dherg trade ship to Belgrig. Persephone's determination wavers as she contemplates the dangers of the journey, especially relying on Suri's readiness to face the giant. Her group includes Bryn, Moya, Arion, and 3 Dherg guides, with tension brewing over the rune presence. Despite her fear, Persephone knows the journey is crucial for securing weapons to protect their people. Holding Bryn's hand for reassurance, she gathers her courage and leads the group onto the ship, symbolizing her commitment to the mission and her role as their leader. Part 14. The Nightmare. In Chapter 1, Mawandul grows frustrated with his father, Fane Lothian, whom he sees as weak for not addressing recent conflicts with the runes more forcefully. During a council meeting, Mawandul overhears discussions of a possible assassination plot against the Fane, fueled by tensions among the tribes over Miralith dominance. Lothian dismisses the threat, confident in his protection and the power of the art. Nevertheless, his advisor, Vasek, urges caution, advising assurances to ease fears among the tribes. As the meeting ends, Mawandul leaves with Vidar, considering the precarious position of his father's rule. In Chapter 2, Mawandul's boredom during an Aquila meeting leads to a public embarrassment when he falls asleep and cries out from a nightmare. Vidar chastises him harshly, warning that his behavior could harm both their reputations and threatening to turn others against him. After Vidar leaves, Imali offers Mawandul insight, noting that Vidar's anger stems from unfulfilled desires for respect. She warns Mawandul to be cautious, as many are eager to exploit his future power. Her words reinforce the importance of vigilance, leaving Mawandul contemplating his role and the hidden dangers within the court. In Chapter 3, Mawandul reflects on his newfound freedom before a secret gathering of Miralith. He observes the crowd as they begin to criticize Vidar's weak leadership in the council, particularly his lack of commitment to Miralith values. Makareta and Aiden rally the group, discussing the need for change and suggesting Mawandul as the rightful replacement for Vidar in the Aquila. With rising tension, they encourage Mawandul to assert his potential power. As the meeting concludes, Makareta gives him a cloak, symbolizing his initiation into their group and strengthening his role in their plans for Miralith dominance. Part 15. Carrick. In Chapter 1, Persephone, Roan, Arion, Moya, and Bryn are on a small, cramped ship with dwarven sailors who resent their presence. Roan, fascinated by the ship's mechanics, marvels at its construction. Bryn studies Arion's bandages, identifying their markings as a primitive form of writing used to block magic, and hypothesizes that symbols could represent sounds. Arion confirms the markings are a dampening spell in the language of creation. Meanwhile, Roan invents a primitive bow, impressing the group with its power, though the sailors fear it as magic. They continue toward their destination, uncertain but progressing steadily. In Chapter 2, Persephone and her group reach Belgrig, catching their first glimpse of the forbidding landscape and fortress city carved by dwarfs. As they disembark in the rain, Persephone is awed by the towering cliffs and the city's fortress-like wall, which hints at an ancient war. They are led by Frost and Flood, who rush them through the city's interior, growing increasingly evasive. As they reach a grand hall, Persephone demands answers, sensing tension and mistrust. Their guide's true intentions are questioned when a dwarf panics at their sight, foreshadowing trouble for the group in this mysterious and hostile land. Part 16. Long Gone. In Chapter 1, Wraith and his companions Malcolm and Tesh face a day of inactivity as rain interrupts their training. Wraith, tired and weary, resists taking on leadership duties as chieftain, preferring to avoid responsibilities. Tesh, a quick learner, shows promise in their training sessions, while Malcolm recounts his day of handling the local farmers and checking on Gelston, who is recovering from a lightning strike but suffering from memory loss and pain. The group reflects on their struggles, with Wraith dismissing the idea of leadership, but the underlying tension about his role continues to simmer. In Chapter 2, Nifron urges Wraith to attend the council meeting as his presence is needed to avoid disruption. Wraith, however, is more concerned with finding Persephone, who has mysteriously left. After confronting Padera, he learns that she, along with Moya, Suri, Bryn, and Roan, went to Belgrig, the land of the Dherg, to obtain better weapons for the war. The Dherg, known for their deceit, invited them in exchange for a service involving a giant. Nifron expresses skepticism about the Dherg, but sees the potential benefit if Persephone succeeds, leaving Wraith uneasy about his decision to leave his sword behind. Part 17. Gronbach in Chapter 1, Suri and her group, including Arion, Persephone, Moya, and others, find themselves in a tense situation with the Dherg. They are surrounded by Dherg warriors and escorted into a dark room, where they are held in custody for entering forbidden lands. Arion tries to reassure Suri, telling her she has the potential to use her abilities to escape, but Suri remains hesitant. Tension rises as the group waits to see if the Dherg will allow them to leave, and Arion vows to protect them if things escalate. Suri struggles with her powers, unsure of her ability to act. In Chapter 2, Persephone and her group are escorted to a small study where they meet Gronbach Ike Prigmore, the mayor of Carrick. Gronbach initially resists their offer to defeat the giant Balgargarath in exchange for weapons, citing his people's treaties with the Fhrey. However, after the group explains the urgency and the threat posed by the giant, Gronbach reluctantly agrees to provide weapons. Persephone negotiates for 1,000 gray metal swords, and they strike a deal. Gronbach reveals that Balgargarath is not a giant but a demon, raising the stakes of their mission. Part 18. Choosing Swords and Shield. In Chapter 1, Persephone reflects on the unsettling new world of the Dherg as she lies awake in a room provided by Gronbach. She is troubled by the idea of facing a demon, Balgargarath, and fears the unknown. Bryn joins her, and they discuss their knowledge of demons, with Bryn sharing a chilling legend. Moya, Roan, and Breen all express their desire to accompany Persephone in facing the danger, despite her concerns about their safety. Tensions rise as Moya insists on protecting Persephone, leading to a heartfelt moment of agreement. The group prepares to face the unknown together. In Chapter 2, Suri reflects on how much has changed since her time in the Hawthorn Glen. She's now in a cold, dark room far from home, with Minna by her side. Suri grapples with feelings of loss, guilt, and uncertainty, especially regarding her previous actions and the death of Rapnagar. Arian, recovering from the boat ride, encourages Suri to practice a chant to help focus her magic. Suri fears her power and its consequences, but Arian insists that training will help. Suri agrees to learn, hoping it will prevent her from repeating past mistakes. In Chapter 3, the group is treated to a fine breakfast, but stress prevents Persephone from eating much. They are then presented with weapons, including halberds and spears, and each selects what they'll carry for the journey. The group, along with Grambach and the nervous Dherg, head out into the city square, where Persephone notices the absence of livestock and people. They are guided toward Esbelberg, a towering gate. Grambach explains that their mission is to rid the Dherg of Balgargarath and restore their heritage. The group sets off, with tensions rising between Frost and Flood. Part 19. Neath. In Chapter 1, Persephone is in awe of the massive Esbelberg Gate, which leads to the city of Neath, home to gods and giants. As they approach the gate, Persephone converses with Arian, who reveals she's over 2,000 years old. The group discusses the difficulty of trapping the demon Balgargarath, who was lured into tunnels deep within the mountain. The dwarfs explain that the demon was lost, not imprisoned, and the knockers powered by water helped keep it distracted. As they near the gate, an earthquake shakes the ground, signaling that Balgargarath is coming closer. The group prepares to enter. In Chapter 2, Suri struggles with the unsettling reality of caves and doors as the group ventures deeper into the mountain beneath Neath. They discover an immense, beautifully lit chamber filled with statues and fountains, leading to stairs that descend toward the city of Neath. As they go further, Suri becomes hesitant to use her power to create fire, fearing she might hurt her friends. Meanwhile, tensions rise among the group, particularly between Frost and Flood, as they argue over their strategy. The chapter ends with Moya investigating a mysterious sound in the dark, prompting Persephone to join her. In Chapter 3, Persephone and Moya explore an abandoned building, suspecting danger after hearing strange noises. They discover a dead armored rat, which Moya dismisses as an accident, but Persephone senses something more sinister. She spots a shadowy, man-sized creature with glowing red eyes watching them from above. Convinced that the rat's death was no accident, Persephone urges Moya to retreat. Back at camp, the group discusses the possibility of a Rao, an evil spirit that consumes faces. Suri shares unsettling tales of the creature's danger, leaving the group worried about what might be hunting them. Part 20. Betrayal. In Chapter 1, Mawandul secretly retrieves a gray cloak, feeling both foolish and oddly exhilarated when he wears it. His father, Lothian, unexpectedly visits his room, creating an awkward atmosphere. Lothian warns Mawandul to avoid the Aquila, implying potential danger. Mawandul questions his father about an impending war with the runes, but Lothian dismisses the idea, suggesting the threat is not serious. Lothian explains the importance of controlling tensions, comparing the runes to animals, and reveals he's addressing the Aquila on something else. Mawandul is left confused, uncertain about what's really happening. In Chapter 2, Mawandul, banished from the Aquila, spends his day in boredom. He contemplates taking up painting to impress Macareta, but is distracted by a mysterious figure in the garden, sitting in front of the door. The stranger speaks cryptically about hatred, comparing it to fine wine that, when left unchecked, can consume a person. Mawandul is puzzled by the man's words, but also intrigued. The encounter hints at deeper emotional turmoil and foreshadows challenges ahead. Mawandul leaves the garden, still unsure about the stranger's warning, but it lingers in his thoughts. In Chapter 3, Mawandul walks aimlessly through the day, trying to escape his unsettling encounter with the stranger. Arriving late to the Rose Bridge, he finds a large crowd celebrating, where he is congratulated for becoming the new senior counselor of the Aquila after Vidar's arrest for treason. Confused, he learns that Vidar was framed in a plot masterminded by his own group, orchestrated by Aiden and Macareta. Mawandul grapples with the idea of Vidar's innocence while relishing his newfound position. He is surprised to discover that he must choose a junior counselor, a responsibility he hadn't anticipated. Part 21. Losing Face. In Chapter 1, Persephone awakens to find Bryn being kidnapped by a Rheo, a monstrous creature. She and her group, including Moya, Suri, and the Wolf Minna, pursue the creature through dark, crumbling ruins. They reach a chasm, where the Rheo throws Bryn into the abyss. Persephone is paralyzed with grief, but the group continues to try to stop the Rheo. Moya attempts to shoot the creature with a bow, but the arrow doesn't fly straight. As the Rheo prepares to topple a pillar onto them, Persephone realizes her leadership failures, and the group falls into darkness when the ground collapses. In Chapter 2, Persephone, after nearly drowning in an underground river, finds herself trapped under a low ceiling with a strong current dragging her along. She recalls a past incident involving Morton Whipple's tragic fall through ice and realizes she's alone, her companions possibly dead. After struggling in the water, Persephone is finally pulled to safety by Bryn. The group, including Moya, Roan, and others, emerges from the water shaken and cold. Tensions rise as Frost confronts Arion about not using his powers to save them. Suri, the mystic, then uses her emerging abilities to dry everyone off and create warmth. In Chapter 3, Persephone and the group find themselves deep underground, unsure if they are alive or dead. Persephone wonders about their fate, while Frost assures her they are still alive, though trapped. The group discusses their limited food supply and the danger they face from the demon Balgargarath, who may be awakened by their digging. Rain, the expert digger, reveals their location beneath the Rollberg, close to the Agave, an ancient chamber where their ancestors unwittingly unleashed Balgargarath. Persephone realizes that their only option is to confront the demon or face its destruction later. Part 22. The Agave. In Chapter 1, Suri feels trapped in a cavern, though she isn't panicked, knowing she can escape if necessary. She and Arion discuss their situation, with Arion advising Suri to trust her instincts as an artist. Suri reflects on her abilities and realizes that her power comes from her creativity and intuition. Arion teaches her how to tap into the life force of those around her, which allows Suri to access the chords of existence. She practices manipulating the stone and the water's power, growing more confident in her abilities, though she remains uncertain of her capacity to use them in the upcoming battle. In Chapter 2, Persephone and her group follow Rain as he uses his great pickaxe to break open a rock, revealing a passage. The group squeezes through to a large underground cavern filled with natural beauty, including pools and glowing lichen. As they proceed, Rain leads them to a mysterious crack in the stone, which he identifies as the Agave. The group explores a small cave where they find tablets with strange markings. Bryn believes the tablets are messages from an ancient being, possibly related to the creation of the world, including references to Mari. Tension rises as Minna senses something approaching. Part 23. The Gula Runes. In Chapter 1, Wraith returns to the chieftain's meeting with a small entourage, including his advisor Malcolm, Shield Tesh, and Nifron, who proposes himself as the best leader for the war against the Fhrey. Despite his impressive battle experience, Nifron's offer is rejected due to his Fhrey heritage. Tensions rise when a Gula army approaches, prompting the chieftains to seek Wraith's help in negotiations. Wraith reluctantly agrees to represent them, but only on the condition that they take responsibility for the outcome. The chapter sets the stage for a looming conflict, with Wraith caught between his past and present duties. In Chapter 2, Wraith, Tegan, Malcolm, and Tesh walk toward a hill near the Gula Rune encampment. They are preparing for a council meeting, but the Gula chieftains are late to arrive. When they finally do, Wraith encounters Udger, Siegel, and Wortman, who all have personal grievances with his family. The tense meeting takes a hostile turn when the chieftains assume Wraith has brought them into a trap, planning to kill them. Wraith protests, but the Gula are unconvinced, leaving with threats of violence. Wraith's choice to lead the meeting instead of his father comes into question. Part 24. Balgargarath. In Chapter 1, Persephone senses an impending danger, and Arion leads the group to the pool. As a deafening noise fills the air, a giant demon, Balgargarath, emerges from the cavern wall. Suri attempts to use magic to stop it, but the demon is revealed to be something unnatural, not alive, and impervious to harm. Arion, realizing that the creature cannot be killed, works with the dwarves to block its path by sealing the opening. Despite their efforts, the group faces an uncertain future, realizing they may be trapped forever without enough resources. In Chapter 2, Suri notices Arian's bloodied nose as the strain of maintaining the shield against Balgargarath takes its toll. Arian admits the creature is probing for weaknesses, and despite her skills, keeping the shield active is exhausting. Suri offers to help, but Arian warns her it's more difficult than it seems. Arian reflects on her past mistakes, feeling responsible for their current predicament. She confesses her arrogance in believing she could defeat the demon. As Balgargarath relentlessly attacks the barrier, Arian's guilt and exhaustion grow, and the group faces the looming threat with little hope. In Chapter 3, Roan focuses on deciphering the symbols on a stone tablet, believing the gaps between sounds might hold the key. While the group is resting, Roan reflects on the patterns of snoring from the Dherg and connects it to the markings. She discovers the tablet is not a table, but another inscription. Bryn struggles to make sense of the symbols, but Roan suggests a new approach. Reading the marks from right to left instead of left to right. When Bryn tries this, Suri recognizes the meaning, marking a breakthrough in their understanding of the mysterious language. In Chapter 4, Suri realizes that the sounds Bryn is making while reading the symbols are part of a weaving pattern that could alter the world's tone. Arian explains that such a pattern could be used to tap into the fundamental forces of creation. Suri links this concept to the creation of Balgargarath, a monstrous being, and senses a vast power just beyond a sealed crack. As the group discusses their options for escape, Arian reveals she's using the group's energy to keep Balgargarath at bay, but it's draining her. Suri decides to learn how to harness the power herself. Part 25. Makareta. In Chapter 1, Maundul, the Crown Prince, begins his first day as senior counselor alongside Makareta. The meeting quickly turns chaotic when Makareta proposes a major restructuring of the Aquila, sparking outrage. As tensions rise, Makareta uses her art to subdue an adversary, declaring the Mirrorleith's supremacy. Maundul is shocked to learn that their plan involves assassinating his father, the Fane, to hasten the rise of the Mirrorleith. Confused and overwhelmed, he realizes that Makareta has manipulated him into playing a key role in a dangerous plot for power, and his world unravels around him. Part 26. The Challenge. In Chapter 1, Wraith and Malcolm discuss the looming threat of the Gularuns as their camp is surrounded by the enemy's distant drumbeats. Wraith, a former Durian, reflects on his lack of true combat experience and the painful memories of his past. He and Malcolm exchange tense, personal remarks, with Malcolm suggesting that Wraith's feelings for Persephone stem from unresolved trauma over the deaths of his mother and sister. Despite their differences, they share a brief truce, but Wraith remains grim about the future. As they prepare for an inevitable battle, they agree that their only option is to wait for the arrival of reinforcements. In Chapter 2, Gifford, in pain and searching for his crutch, encounters Pedera, who reveals that Juan has left for the Dherg to seek weapons. She then shocks Gifford with a revelation about his birth. His mother, Arya, had died giving him life, fulfilling a prophecy that he would one day run faster and farther than anyone, with the fate of their people resting on it. Pedera explains that she raised him harshly, believing in the prophecy despite Gifford's physical limitations. With war approaching, Gifford reflects on his past, feeling lost and guilty, and regrets not being able to absolve Roan for his pain. In Chapter 3, Nifron enters the council meeting and learns that the Gularuns have chosen Udger to challenge the Southern Koenig, aiming to rule the 10 clans. Despite the Gula's large numbers, the council struggles to find a champion to face Udger. Nifron offers to fight, but Tegan refuses, citing the impossibility of a Fhrey becoming Koenig. Nifron stresses that the Fhrey are their best chance for victory, but Tegan insists on following their laws. The council debates, with Wraith reluctantly agreeing to take on Udger to avenge his brother, despite his doubts about his own abilities. Part 27. Facing the Demon. In Chapter 1, Roan wakes up in a dark, unfamiliar place, realizing she and her companions are trapped in a stone tomb beneath the earth with little food or water and a demon threatening them. As Roan reflects on her past, she feels guilty for her actions that hurt Gifford. Bryn shares her findings from studying tablets, revealing the story of a prisoner named the Three, who offered the dwarfs knowledge of metalworking in exchange for his freedom. After multiple failed attempts, he gave them the secret to immortality, but ultimately he created a sentinel, Balgargarath, to prevent the dwarfs from accessing his wisdom. In Chapter 2, Suri and Minna approach Arian, who is gravely ill, her condition worsened by hours of exertion. Arian reveals she can grant Suri the power to use the deep chords, but it requires a tragic sacrifice. Suri must kill her. Arian believes the immense emotional energy from Suri's love and grief will fuel the power needed. Despite Arian's insistence, Suri is paralyzed by fear and anguish, unable to make the choice. She contemplates her failure and her deep bond with Arian, struggling to find another way to save everyone without resorting to violence. In Chapter 3, Persephone's exhaustion fades when a stone barricade bursts, revealing a battle between a dragon and Balgargarath, a demon. As Moya and the others prepare to fight, Suri reveals that she created the dragon using a magical weave, and the demon's true name must be marked on a weapon to defeat it. The group scrambles to make preparations while Persephone comforts Suri, who confesses that she killed her friend to unlock the magic. Meanwhile, Arian remains unconscious, though she's likely to survive. The chapter ends with the group facing the dragon and demon's ongoing fight. In Chapter 4, Suri starts a fire, and everyone prepares spears while the dragon battles Balgargarath at the entrance. Persephone observes the dragon's struggle, realizing it is protecting them. As Bryn finishes marking the spears, Moya practices shooting, but her first 2 shots miss. After the dragon is temporarily overpowered, Moya takes another shot with a marked spear, successfully hitting Balgargarath, though the demon isn't killed. With time running out, Moya readies another shot as Balgargarath charges, but the dragon distracts it. Moya's final shot hits, but an explosive wind knocks everyone back before they see the result. Part 28. Death by Steps. In Chapter 1, Persephone and the group survive a destructive event, with everyone checking in to confirm their safety. Arian remains silent, but Suri reassures that she's no worse. The room is in disarray, and Persephone finds a glowing stone. The group assesses their injuries, with Moya, Bryn, and others showing minor wounds. The dragon remains, and Frost expresses disbelief at their victory over Balgargarath, a creature that had eluded them for centuries. Suri, holding Arian, struggles with guilt, but Persephone reassures her, emphasizing that Suri's actions saved them all. Suri reflects on Persephone's comparison to Minna, a wise wolf. In Chapter 2, the group prepares to leave the cave, facing complications due to Arian's unconscious state. The little men suggest leaving her behind, but Persephone refuses. Bryn struggles with the heavy tablets, Moya practices with the bow, and Rain clears a path. Suri, in the dark, mourns Minna, her wolf companion, apologizing and recalling their many conversations. She stays by Minna's side until Persephone calls them to leave. Suri performs a ritual, rubbing her hands together in a circular motion before a burst of fire erupts, signaling Minna's passing. The group is ready to move on. In Chapter 3, the group struggles to ascend the steep death by steps. Suri, exhausted and drained from her loss, reflects on her past with Minna, the wolf. As the others move ahead, Suri hears the familiar sound of panting and hopes it's Minna, but when she turns, there's nothing. Reaching the top, they enter the city of Nath, only to realize they are still far from safety. Tired and hungry, they plan to move upward for water. Suri, grieving and alone, is comforted by Persephone briefly before continuing her solitude. Then, a cold hand grabs her and she freezes. In Chapter 4, the group nears their destination, and Persephone reflects on what might have happened back home, especially with Wraith. While resting at a fountain, they realize Suri is missing. Persephone grows anxious and searches for her, eventually hearing a taunting voice in the dark. As they search, a loud roar and crack of stone echo through the room. Persephone finds the dragon and discovers Suri standing beside it, safe. Suri calmly reassures everyone, showing that the dragon is no threat and has actually been protective. The tension eases as they regroup, but the danger remains. Part 29, Aftermath. In Chapter 1, Mawandul is overwhelmed by chaos inside the Arenthenon as explosions erupt outside. The Aquila members cower in fear while Mawandul processes the shocking realization that Makareta and the Grey Cloaks are plotting against his father. As the building shakes, debris falls, and Mawandul fears for his life. Terrified, he considers running, but instead uses his power to stabilize the structure, holding the ceiling in place as the chaos rages around him. He struggles with his fear and confusion, longing for the safety of his previous life, while the world outside descends into turmoil. In Chapter 2, Mawandul surveys the damage after the battle, finding the Arenthenon scarred but still standing. Imali, injured, discusses the implications of the attack on his father and the Fane's authority. Mawandul grapples with his guilt, feeling he acted out of fear, not heroism, when he used his power to save the building. Imali challenges him to understand the broader consequences of the rebellion, the breaking of traditions, and the looming threat of civil war. She urges him to choose his words carefully when speaking to his father, suggesting that blaming Nifron could unite the tribes and prevent further conflict. In Chapter 3, Imali struggles with an itch in her cast, then meets a mysterious man named Trylos in the garden. He seems to know a lot about recent events, including the Miralith Rebellion and Mawandul's role in blaming Nifron for the insurrection. Trylos hints at the strange connections between Nifron and the rebellion, suggesting that the prince's involvement was more complex than it appears. He raises questions about how Nifron could orchestrate such a plot from far away. Imali grows suspicious of Trylos, who reveals little about himself before leaving, hinting he will be watching her from now on. Part 30. The Nature of Dwarfs. In Chapter 1, the group continues their journey through Neath, with a dragon following them after defeating a Rao. They discover that the dragon, unable to leave Neath, can't go beyond the stairs due to a magical barrier. Suri's spell had been the cause, binding the dragon to the area. As the group debates the dragon's nature and its future, Suri grows emotional, refusing to send the creature back down to the dark depths as it would be left alone. Despite warnings, Suri cannot bear to part with the dragon, even knowing that it will eventually outlive her. In Chapter 2, Persephone and her group encounter a dozen well-armored dwarfs outside Neath. The dwarfs question their success in killing Balgargarath and challenge Persephone's claims. Gronbach, the dwarf leader, dismisses their victory and refuses to honor their bargain for weapons. Tensions rise as he accuses them of lying, ultimately sentencing them to death for trespassing. Persephone, however, reveals that a dragon, created by Suri, guards Neath and is ready to retaliate if they're harmed. She negotiates for safe passage, a special sword to destroy the dragon, and a promise to leave with frost, flood, and rain in exchange for destroying the dragon. Gronbach reluctantly agrees. In Chapter 3, Moya questions Persephone's plan, worried about Roan and Bryn forging the sword. Persephone explains that Roan needs to observe the process, while Bryn will secretly document the details. She reassures Moya that it's not Minna, but still struggles with the burden of their situation. After some frustration, Persephone outlines a new plan for the next day. Moya will stay behind with Arion while Persephone, Roan, and Bryn handle the sword. Moya expresses her loyalty, but Persephone admits her fear. Despite their doubts, Moya reassures Persephone, recognizing her strength as a leader. In Chapter 4, Persephone, Roan, and Bryn reach Neath with Gronbach, who remains outside as they enter. Inside, Bryn and Roan work with Suri to mark the sword with its true name. Suri reveals the blade's significance, calling it Minna's true name. As she holds the sword, Gronbach attempts to seize it, triggering an earthquake-like destruction of Neath. The ancient city collapses, and Gronbach hesitates in disbelief. Suri demands the sword back, and after tense moments, Gronbach returns it. Persephone, now with the sword in hand, prepares to leave, ensuring Gronbach honors his word. In Chapter 5, Persephone's group departs from Neath aboard the Calder Knoll Asterisk, with the crew avoiding them. Arion remains unconscious, but alive. Bryn regrets not studying the tablets, but is amazed when Roan reveals she transferred the tablet markings onto vellum. Persephone inquires about the sword's strength, and Roan confirms it's stronger than bronze. Suri, still holding the sword, reveals the true name of the dragon as Galarabrun, though Persephone prefers Minna. Suri contemplates discarding the sword, but Persephone insists it holds transformative power. Suri reluctantly hands it over, with Persephone determined to use it to change the world. Part 31. The Keening. In Chapter 1, Wraith faces his impending death, preparing for a fight with Udger. He spends the night in luxury, declining food, drink, and women, focused on the battle ahead. Wraith reflects on his survival and the harsh realities of Durian life while bonding with Tesh, who is eager to learn. Wraith teaches the boy that to defeat enemies, one must understand them, particularly the Fhrey. They discuss different fighting styles, with Tesh showing insight into Udger's skill. Wraith laughs, impressed by the boy's perception. As Wraith readies himself, Tesh spots a Dherg ship approaching. In Chapter 2, Wraith prepares for his fight with Udger, reflecting on the inevitability of his death and the spectators who will witness it. Unlike his father, Wraith has little faith in the Durian gods of war, but accepts that his death will be a public spectacle. He muses about the afterlife, questioning the fairness of it, given the differing fates of warriors and non-warriors. Wraith plans to confront Udger early, but his resolve is shaken when 3 women enter the gate, distracting him from his intent to begin the battle ahead of schedule. In Chapter 3, Persephone returns with a powerful sword and the secret to forging weapons like the Phreys. She reveals Roan's ability to create superior swords. Wraith nominates Persephone as Koenig, but the Gula runes demand a combat trial. Moya fights their champion Udgar and kills him with a single shot. The crowd is stunned. Persephone is declared the Koenig by the Gula runes, and Wraith pledges his support. The chieftains accept her leadership. Persephone, injured during a ritual, solidifies her position as Koenig, while Moya's loyalty and skill are reaffirmed. Part 32. The Plan. In Chapter 1, Nifron grapples with the realization that only runes can become Koenig, and he's unable to claim the title. Malcolm reveals that although Nifron cannot be Koenig, he could marry Persephone to rule alongside her. Malcolm points out the need for Nifron's military expertise to train Persephone's troops and strategize against the Fhrey. He suggests that Nifron could eventually become the most powerful ruler, with his legacy shaping history. Despite Nifron's initial rejection of the idea, he considers the possibility of marrying Persephone as a practical solution to unite and lead the runes. In Chapter 2, Suri, Bryn, and the dwarfs care for the wounded Aryan, who is near death. Padera, an old mystic, examines her condition and prepares a healing brew, but warns there is little that can be done. Suri is torn with guilt and uncertainty, especially after sacrificing her wolf, Minna, to save Aryan. Bryn suggests that Suri might have the power to heal Aryan, recalling the strange things Suri has done before. Though terrified of making a mistake, Suri is urged to act quickly. Finally, after seeing a butterfly, Suri decides to try and save Aryan with her powers.